Great. Well, this is going to be small, wonderful, and intimate, and very exciting. I don't know a lot about live television. I've done a little bit of it. I used to do Tomorrow's World many, many years ago. And I'm about to embark on a controversial programme called Drugs Live. And in reading all the materials that I've been given about this, I learned an enormous amount. And I hope, we've got a fantastic panel, some great clips, and I think you'll have the opportunity to learn. It's a masterclass, so interrupt as much as you want, not with your phones, just with, asking questions. Mixing factual or documentary approaches with live or as live techniques has brought some extraordinary successes. Absolutely mammoth audiences, real drama, real jeopardy, critical success, and even the most amazing discovery of a planet orbiting a distant star. How can you beat that? So there's lots to learn, as well as this very distinguished and experienced group of practitioners and commissioners who I'll introduce in a minute. We've got a lot of clips. I've just discovered that this session is an hour, not 90 minutes, so we're going to go like the clappers. So on my furthest right is Kim Shillinglaw. She's the BBC Commissioning Editor for Science and Natural History, and relevant to this, she commissioned Planet Earth Live and Stargazing Live. And one thing I didn't know about her is that while she was working at CBBC, she developed and commissioned Horrible Histories, for which you deserve a medal.
Thank you. Just one at Banff, actually.
And one at Banff.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Nice,
completely brilliant. Lisa Alston, on my left, best known for Watchdog and now Rogue Traders, but crucially for this session, she is the executive producer for Lambing Live, Stargazing Live, and in July she's going to be ensuring that a volcano goes off bang on time with Volcano Live, and you're going to let us know how you do that. Roger Webb, on my far left, is the series producer on Autumn Watch and Spring Watch, and is extremely wet, I believe, having had to suffer the storms, and Spring Watch ended last night, I think?
It did finish last night.
Yeah, very wet.
Very wet, yes.
Very wet. And also was one of the two series producers on Planet Earth Live. And finally, Sanjay Singhal, formidable managing director at Dragonfly, where they've taken this genre into much tougher areas. Programs like Going Cold Turkey, which is not natural history, I don't think. Kill It, Cook It, Eat It, One Born Every Minute. And I think you've just, I suppose it is event television, you've just crashed a passenger plane in the Mexican desert.
Indeed, we were thinking of doing that live, but thank God we didn't. But yeah, it was same sort of principles. Yeah, we pulled it off though.
Right.
4 years later.
If you were watching earlier on, we saw what looked like disaster unfolding. 3 young elephant mums up in Samburu set out to cross the river with 3 young calves, but the river is up. It's the rainy season. It was raging. The family was swept away, and David Donovan and our camera crew could only watch powerless. The calves are tiny. Their feet can't touch the bottom.
This is really, really bad. Tiny babies. Yeah, this could mean a disaster actually. This is the problem of not having any proper leadership in the families. Oh my God, what is one? See that? Oh God, this is so painful watching this happening. Oh my goodness.
They're now in the deepest, most dangerous section of the river. The mothers lose their footing. Their calves are swept away.
That's so terrible, isn't it? Ken, from a commissioning editor's point of view, what excites you about this genre that keeps you going with it?
Do you mean generally? Or
generally.
Okay. I think one of the things that's really interesting here is that live can be a tool to achieve some other ends. I don't believe that live's an end in itself, but it can help us to get to other places. The genres that I look after, science and natural history, can tend to be quite stately genres, and that's not a bad thing when it tips up with Frozen Planet or Madagascar or what have you. But I'm very interested in whether we can get other tonalities to sit alongside that more classic sort of landmark, and particularly whether we can use something like live to create a sense of event and, crucially, a sense of a slightly more informal tone and conversational tone around the output. You could see in that clip, for instance, and there were issues with that series, but in that, having David, narrating as he went along, the looser feel of the footage, all of that is very different to the kind of stateliness that can creep into the more obviously constructed documentary that has tended to characterise science and natural history output. But I think it's a means to an end, and there are other shows that, for instance, I've commissioned that Human Power Station, which Sanjay's company made for us, The Young Ones on BBC One, obviously Stargazing, which Lisa does on 2, or something like Afterlife or Inside Michael Mosley on BBC 4, where actually they're not live, but what they are doing is trying to focus the show around a particular point in time, and I think there's something around in that that's very, very interesting to getting a different tone into some of these sort of more stately genres.
Mm. Lisa, why do you... This is a kind of quick-fire round so that we can hear from everybody. Why do you... Your two series in this genre, Lambing Live and Stargazing Live, have been real blockbuster successes. Why do you think audiences are responding to this genre?
I think they're two very different kind of shows. I think that Lambing Live showed people a world that they thought that they knew, but actually they didn't. And when you're doing a stripped show across 5 nights, I think you shouldn't be scared of information. There's no such thing as too much information with a programme like that. And it was completely clear from the beginning with Lambing Live that it was totally fascinating, ingenious stuff that these families are... the story is about the whole year, and lambing is the culmination of that year. And the success of lambing defines the success of that farm. So there's a lot of jeopardy, and it truly is life and death. I think with Stargazing Live, it's about the wonders of the night sky above us. It's something that we can all just step out of our houses and see when it's clear of an evening, which it isn't always. That's another logistical nightmare on live. But involving the audience, we were able to say on Stargazing Live, look, we've got a partial eclipse tomorrow morning. We're in Macclesfield. It's not very promising. It's going to be cloudy. But can you get out there and take pictures of the eclipse wherever you are? And on that night's programme, we were able to show people's pictures from all around the UK, run them during the closing credits, put people's names up, where they're from. And that's a total thrill for the audience to feel that they had an involvement in the programme.
Sandra, this session is called When Live Meets Documentaries. What makes what you do in this genre documentary, in your view?
Well, I mean, to start with, I don't go to bed worrying at night about whether something's a documentary or not. I think ultimately the audience doesn't care. They'll watch it because it's a really strong idea, and I don't think anyone other than the people on this panel, this room, would ever configure a conversation about whether it's a documentary or not. But that said, I'd say the things that draw us towards these ideas and we think that makes them still consistent in tone with the other programs we make are they are factual ideas. They're told through strong character storylines, and they have an unfolding narrative. And I think that would be true of all of the documentaries we make in a conventional sense. And I think it would be true of the documentary programs that have been live, if you'd call them that, that we'd be discussing later today. But I would just say very quickly, I think that it's a mistake to, I think there's a bit of a tendency at the moment for all documentaries to suddenly, loads more ideas are being presented as live ideas. It's a kind of way of sexing them up and saying, great, there isn't enough content here, but we'll do it live and it's going to be great. And I think that's a mistake. In fact, we were just, we were guilty of ourselves. We were just pitching an idea to Channel 4, which was going to be a live strip show this summer. And then we they came away, they were really excited about it. We came away really excited about it. And then we had two problems. One was we thought, shit, this might mean it'll screw all of us on holidays, which is a really big problem. And secondly, we thought, but does it actually work as a live idea? We don't think it's a live idea. And luckily, Channel 4 turned around and said, no, we don't think it's a live idea either. Just do it as a normal documentary. And I think that we shouldn't
just
rush to...
interrogate that for a minute. What is it that makes something validly live? What is the essential ingredient that...
Well, for me...
I mean, it must be something that you think about in receiving ideas as well. Yeah. So we can all...
No, you go first, please. I can't really, actually. I'm sorry. Nice try, but I can't, I'm afraid. You'll soon see.
Clearly there are lots of things that can make a show worth being live, and, some of them are, clearly something literally unfolding in front of your eyes. But I think the thing that I'm maybe more interested in at the moment is where it feels like there's something about the conversation that done live will be really interesting. So, I mean, clearly, and talk to Roger about this, Springwatch was the sort of granddaddy of that. I mean, if you look closely at Springwatch, and Roger, I hope you'll feel comfortable with me saying this, there actually isn't that much in terms of unfolding events that's really happening live. I mean, the nest cams, if you like, do sometimes reveal really interesting things happening live, but quite often not a lot is happening. What is really special, and I think Springwatch has been, just sort of a glorious programme, hugely valued by the audience, for the quality of conversation that has come out of Chris, Kate, Michaela, Martin, sitting on the sofa and responding live. And there's something very intimate that makes the audience feel invited in to that conversation that I think is very, very hard to pull off, but rather wonderful when you do. And I think on stargazing, stargazing is a different programme from Springwatch, very different in its own way, but it also has some of that interesting conversational quality that you don't often get on television. Television can be a terribly remote medium in lots of ways.
I think the audience can genuinely feel part of the show, and I think they do with Springwatch, and I think they probably do with stargazing, Lisa. And I think that's quite special about the live shows. Is that interactivity and a two-way conversation. And with Springwatch, the audience have such an input that they really are affecting our content and what we put on air. And, that is quite unique, I think.
It's also critically important how you cast your presenters on a live show. I call it framing the live. So you've got to have someone who has got live expertise, so that's Kate Humble on Lambing Live, Dara O'Brien on Stargazing Live, although Brian Cox turned out to be just as good live. Is there anything he can't do? And on Volcano
There was a
Live,
really awkward moment, wasn't there, in the very first episode of the first series where that wasn't quite clear.
But also,
Adam Henson hadn't done live.
Adam hadn't done live, but he brings the expertise, and we gave him some training. It's a risk, But as the series went on, he gained an experience. And what someone like that brings to a show is immeasurable, because you can then go into question and answer sessions. That's another point where the audience feel they're being involved and listened to. You can put questions to your presenter because you know he's imbued in that subject because he's been in sheep farming, from the day he was born.
What makes a great, for you, a great episode of Autumn Watch or Spring Watch? Maybe you can talk about, one of the things that people have talked about is the jeopardy of live and the drama of live, and I guess you've been experiencing it a little bit this week.
Yeah,
so it's two questions really.
Yeah, I mean, it's great when things happen live, say we go to a nest camera and literally a chick falls out of the nest, but to be honest, that is rare, as Kim's already kind of sort of muted. But having a good story to tell, and we follow the characters 24 hours a day virtually through our webcams, and we're constantly recording what's happening, and then when we're able to unravel that story, a fascinating story that's happened in the last 24 hours, and bring that to the audience, who many of them themselves have been following live on the web anyway, and they've been involved in a conversation with what we call our nest watchers or story developers, who are there watching these birds and the events as they unfold, and having a conversation via the web with the audience. And then when we come to the show, we're able to bring that full story to the whole audience, and that's special, and is what makes, I think.
It's really interesting if you go down to watch the Spring Watch operation. Those banks, literally, banks of people, often quite young, watching banks of cameras, 4 stories emerging, having a conversation with the audience who are also watching that footage. I mean, it's a remarkable off-air operation that is, genuinely sort of interactive online, isn't it?
And Spring Watch goes much further than just the 1 hour of TV. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. It is literally a 24-hour experience across the 3 weeks it's on air, and I think that's quite special.
Do you want to tell us about what happened this week?
This weekend we had terrible floods in Wales, and literally the whole production village was almost washed away. A lot of our cameras were submerged in water. And remarkably, the team rescued it. We had to bring cranes in, a porta cabin was moved and pushed into the side of the OB truck, fibre optic cables were broken, but literally, the
BBC Two on standby for, no transmissions.
No calls were made to important people to tell them this is what's happening, we might not have a show. But the team, not me, the team, pulled it round and got things out of the water and plugged things back in, and they worked.
Let's have a look at a clip.
Remarkably.
I don't know when
At
this
the
clip
end of
was
last
from.
week, a storm was brewing. The rain had started, and our wildlife was beginning to be affected. Our lovely little goldcrest nest was being blown around all over the place. It's quite a neat-looking nest. Common sandpiper, already starting to be a bit drenched. And up in the osprey nest, the chicks were wet. There's still enough energy for a bit of bickering. And in the barn, the owls were absolutely fine.
Now, Martin mentioned that there was a storm brewing, and you would have seen that if you were watching the weather forecast, because here was the map that we saw at the end of the week. Look at that swirl of heavy rain, and look how it's centred over Western Wales. But it absolutely poured down here. In one spot close to Aberystwyth, there were 186 millimetres in just 48 hours. The winds gusted up to 80 miles an hour, and very sadly, as a result, we had the worst floods here since 1973.
And a lot changed for us in 24 hours. This is what happened on Friday and Saturday. Well, the wet weather that was forecast for Friday delivered here in West Wales. It rained, and it rained, and it rained. The riverbanks burst, and a lot of places in West Wales were flooded. What we weren't worried about at the time was what would happen to us, but look at this. Our production village has turned into a lake. By Friday, we had to evacuate, and there was a huge effort to save as much equipment as possible. The force of the water moved a 4-ton porta cabin. The road to the reserve was completely flooded out and inaccessible, and the water just kept rising.
At 12:42 on Friday, the decision was made to shut down the entire Springwatch site. And that meant we instantly lost contact with all of our wildlife.
I mean,
and what happened? And what happened?
In a funny sort of way, that was a dream because it was a disaster and we love a bit of jeopardy and all that. But it was on a level that none of us were expecting. You know, we hope for things to go slightly wrong for our birds or whatever, but for the whole site to be submerged in water, that's not something we would ever wish for.
But I guess it is the essence of life.
It is, and that's...
It is the very, very essence of life, isn't it?
And there was a big part of me thinking, this is great, you know? But I just hope and pray we can get it on air to deliver the show that we did. Because you know you're going to have people on the edge of their seats, well, you hope.
We had a not dissimilar experience on Lambing Live last year in Cumbria, where we had biblical rain. And on the first night, it looked like we were going to lose the satellite link because it was so windy, so we had to move the truck after the first show. On the second show, we fell off air for a total of 12 minutes. And several learning points out of that. All of the BT material we had was in the truck. So when we lost power to the truck, we literally had all of our eggs in one basket. So for Volcano Live next month, we have 2 galleries. We have a gallery in Hawaii, and we have a gallery in London, and London is playing everything in. And I know no one will believe me here, but Hawaii is the wettest place in America, and it rains every single day, so we face exactly the same issues. And that is one of the great jeopardies of live, particularly if you're working outside. These things can and do happen, and you have to have a plan B. And actually on Lambing Live, while we were sitting in darkness and I was thinking this is the worst moment of my life, people were emailing in saying, oh, it's so exciting, I'm on the edge of my seat.
12 minutes later.
Because it was live telly.
Yes.
While we're trading horror stories, just really quickly, on one of the clips we'll show you in a minute, Going Cold Turkey. It was 6 years ago, and we were following heroin addicts as they were going into a detox clinic in Harrogate to go through a withdrawal, clinical withdrawal program over 5 days. And we were live morning and night on Channel 4. The only problem was we couldn't cast it because these were genuine heroin addicts and they were genuinely needing treatment, and we were absolutely hands-off in terms of how that was done. The only problem was they didn't have anybody. We were live on Sunday, and on Friday we still had only one person confirmed. We were expecting 3. We had one person confirmed. Channel 4 took the decision that at one stage they said, we'll go with 2, and at one stage by Saturday said, even if it's one person, we'll still go live. And we're thinking, well, that's great, but how you can make 10 hours of TV out of watching one person give up heroin? It's going to be pretty tough. And luckily, thankfully, on the Sunday morning, 3 people rocked up, and we just about made it. But I mean, that's not against the elements, but much more worrying it's against real people. That's the kind of jeopardy that's invisible to the audience, isn't it? That's 100%, because you can't package up saying... The jeopardy that raises your heart rate a great deal. Exactly. But to no great benefit for the audience. Anyway, since you're talking, let's start going on the journey, a rather different journey, definitely not in natural history, that Dragonfly, or Firefly and then Dragonfly, has gone on in this area, starting with Going Cold Turkey, which was genuinely live, and going towards using live techniques in other areas to great success. Great, so I've got about 3 clips to run through. The first one is Going Cold Turkey, which, as I say, 6 years ago on Channel 4, every night around 11 o'clock and in the morning as well, following these heroin addicts coming off their drugs. So if we could show a clip of that, please.
Good morning and welcome back live to the Harrogate Clinic in North Yorkshire, where it's been a testing 2 days for Darren, Amanda and Alison as their bodies just begin to come back to life. They've been off heroin, or in Amanda's case methadone, for around 48 hours now and are well into their withdrawal. For Darren and Alison, it's been a difficult night.
Are these some gloves?
And we'll be finding out more about the consequences of yesterday's room search.
What size are that?
But before all that, let's have a reminder of who our patients are and why they're here.
became apparent it was there. Do you know what I mean? I saw it and I became very curious to what it did and what it was all about. I was 16 years old when I tried it. If you take into account that I've been on it 10 years now, and all I'm doing really is just taking it just to film normal like everybody else.
So I think what I think you can see there is the reason we were compelled to do it was that live. That's really gritty, real social documentary subject matter. You know, real people genuinely struggling to come off drugs, and it's the sort of thing that time and again documentarians would go and make in a conventional manner. The reason we went live on this show was that we thought, with a 5-day narrative, we thought we could bring it, make it much more visceral. Because if people could be with you every step of the way, effectively, we could shine a light on this process in a way that we felt would make it much more impactful and much realer. And the live felt like a really good way of doing it because we could track their progress night by night. Obviously, paramount concerns about making sure the contributors on that occasion, because obviously these are some of the few live programs that are actually involving real people who are quite vulnerable. Paramount concerns that the contributors there, their welfare needs are being looked after, because obviously they don't watch any of this stuff as it's going out, and I'm sure editorial policy would have had a heart attack over some of this stuff, but they've got to pre-consent to all of this material taking place. They don't watch any of it until after they've come out, and you can imagine the kind of trauma and vulnerability that some of these people have. And therefore what was really important for us was we were in a clinic and we did not interfere at all. We never produced anything that was taking place in relation to the treatment of these guys, and also the doctors signed off every single bit of tape that we were showing as part of our live programme. So that was Going Cold Turkey, and that started about 6 years ago. We then followed that up with another series called Britain's Deadliest Addictions, which did the same kind of idea again. The next clip, actually funny, I want to show you was not a live show, but I want to show you the evolution where we took in. It talks a little bit to what Kim was saying in terms of shows like Human Power Station and so on, which is live is a fantastic machine. You've got 30 cameras, you've got an OB truck, you've got tons of producers, you've got this huge machinery in place to tell this story. And we wondered, what if you put all that in place, but then don't do it live, but give the theatricality, Channel 5 started calling it factual theatre, which may be a bit grandiose, but it seems to sum it up. And the clip I want to show you now was actually for a BBC show called Kill It, Cook It, Eat It, which I'm sure Sue remembers very well. And it's, again, not a live show, but shot as live, but with all the kind of impact that we think live could bring. And this, by the way, just to explain, is a show in which we took an abattoir, an existing abattoir, we knocked down all the walls around it, replaced them with glass, built a restaurant on the side of it, invited diners to come in on the condition that they would have to watch the animals being killed and butchered before being cooked, before they'd eat them on that day. So that was the idea behind it. Authentic, original abattoir, obviously, which we don't touch other than replace them with glass walls. It's not, I think we cut it off before it gets too squeamish, but if you don't like animals suffering pain and distress, you might not want to watch this bit. But
now, of course, if you do find this process really upsetting or overwhelming, you don't have to keep watching all the way through. You can turn around. Please feel free to do that. It's really important to remember that we're dealing with baby animals who could easily be startled. So everything is being done here to keep the environment as calm and as quiet as possible. We're turning the lights down, and I'm going to ask everybody here to remain quiet while they're watching. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to make your way, please, to the abattoir and find a position at the windows where you can witness this process. And as I said, please try and be as calm and as quiet as possible. Now, as you can see, the piglets are making their way down the corridor. That is Farmer Charles. These are actually his piglets, so he's helping with this process. Just to reiterate that this is a professional team who have done this hundreds of times before, as well as our expert slaughterman in the slaughterhouse. There is also a meat inspector and a vet to ensure that this process runs as smoothly as possible.
again, very much a sort of arena, we've seen it before. There was a documentary on BBC before about slaughterhouses and so on. We weren't trying to do an investigative piece. We weren't trying to expose the industry. All we were trying to do there was say, if you're going to eat meat, at least understand where it comes from. The best way of doing that was bringing an audience in to watch it and then track their reactions through it. Wasn't live, could easily have been live actually, I think. Probably would be now, I think, if we did it again. But I think just to give you an illustration of, I think, where you can go using live storytelling as your starting point and where it can launch pad into. And the final clip I was going to show you, just rushing through it quickly, is again an example of where I think it went full circle, was from Going Cold Turkey and shows like Kill It, Cook It, Eat It. We then thought, what happens if you take all of that kind of reality-type camera equipment, those from Big Brother, I'm a Celebrity and so on, and what happens if you put it into real situations and just do documentary with them? That led to The Family, it led to 1 Point Every Minute, and it led to The Hotel, and it's led to a number of other rig shows from other companies too. What we then did about 1.5 years ago was thought, well, actually, why don't we go back into One Born Every Minute, go back into the hospital on Christmas Day when there's a really great story about... we're going to show One Born at Christmas, by the way, not Family, and let's see what happens if you track Christmas births live. I won't show you the whole clip, it's cut quite long because I like seeing babies being born and I really like the piece of music on it, but I'll cut out of it at an earlier point. So we could play the One Born at Christmas. So this is from the Princess Anne Hospital, live on Christmas Day. Sorry, that's Going Cold Turkey. No, we don't want that one, that's Family, sorry. While we're just trying to find it. So this is, again, using Julia Bradbury, because, interestingly, one thing just to fill for a second, I think the BBC is in a much better position, actually, fun enough, when it comes to live documentaries and live shows, because they've got so many presenters who are schooled and trained through all the kind of shows, actually, that Lisa makes and The One Show and so on, who can hold together live programming. The minute you start doing it anywhere else, you're suddenly asking presenters who can't do it to do it.
Take some deep breath.
I too, we can scrap the clip, don't worry about it, it's fine. Fundamentally, it was trying to take the One Born brand and do a live show with it. And in all honesty, I'd say it was a really intriguing idea, and it was a very hard one to pull off. But I'd say probably it wasn't the most successful. I think the thing I learned from it was actually the really big brands you've got, whether it's Planet Earth, and that's a different discussion, I guess, Kim, but whether it's One Born Every Minute, sometimes they're better just left. I don't mean to speak or criticise your show, but I think sometimes they're better off left as they are, in the form they are, because that's why people watch them. They watch them because they're crafted and they're beautifully made and they're told in a particular way. And I think sometimes live can actually overcomplicate and make them worse. And I think the audience didn't really come to One Born at Christmas, actually, partly because it's on Christmas Day, but they just didn't come to it. And I think, therefore, my lesson from that was, actually sometimes you're much better off staying with the crafted documentary that audiences love, especially when there's already a brand that they admire.
Good. Well, what about the point that Kim made? I've been struck by it about, it seems to run a little bit in the face of what you're saying, that conversation, live conversation, it's a point I've never heard before, actually, and it's important for me in contemplating how I'm going to make drugs live. But the conversation live is really important. I mean, you seem to be saying, no, event, jeopardy, I think theatre is what's really important. That's a little bit of a difference, I think.
I don't think they contradict each other. I mean, I think we're all in this room trying to do as many new things as we can in television. There are different ways of doing things. So I think, I agree with all of what you're saying. I think there's a particular type of value that a certain type of live can land for the audience that revolves around the sort of live conversation. I think I think what you have to recognise there is it is incredibly difficult to do, and I think to Lisa's point about the number of people who can actually pull that off, the level of just profound and deep expertise that they have to carry off a live conversation on air. So I think that was a point you were making about Adam and the way that he combined with Kate. So that there was always some content to draw on.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think is really, really crucial, and it's incredibly difficult to do. I'm not sure that sits in contradiction to what you were saying.
No, I agree. I just think I think it's that it's a live factual show. I think if there's factual story unfolding, if it's only simply that the presenters happen to be live and they're playing in lots of stuff that happened the day or the week or the month before, I don't actually think that adds much to the storytelling. And for me, I think something needs to be happening live on screen or happened just a few minutes ago in order to give that kind of drama, is all I would say. But I think certainly you want as much. I mean, to be honest, I think none of these shows are really properly live. You know, if anyone saw, The West Wing, in the final series of West Wing, they did a live drama, but they actually did it live, and they did it live. They did it as a presidential debate between the two characters. They came on air. It was done live on the East Coast, live on the West Coast, and it wasn't scripted. They battled it out before a live audience, and that was watched by 12, 15 million people on network television in America, but that was a live show. Nothing pre-recorded, nothing played in, nothing.
I mean, EastEnders did the same thing.
EastEnders did the same thing.
Yeah.
So, but EastEnders would have been scripted, whereas the West Wing show wasn't scripted. So all of our shows aren't really properly live because we're always going to tape at some point. I mean, all I'd say is, it's actually a slightly...
Tape is your safeguard to some degree.
Of course, but it's a risk aversion, isn't it? Because
we're packaging the content live, aren't we?
Packaging the content live, exactly.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, agree.
Lisa, Lambing Live, tell us about, that did not arise in the Natural History Unit, interestingly. It was a documentary commission from the documentaries department, as I understand it. And presumably that has shaped, to some extent, the way that you approached it.
The idea came originally from a documentary producer in the department whose parents happened to run a food fair in Wales, and they're also sheep farmers. And he wrote a proposal which was, in the first instance, I would say quite one-dimensional. It was entirely about the lambing process. But it got commissioned, and I was asked to take it on. And after making a few phone calls, it's quite clear that, to tell the story, you need to tell the story of the year.
Yeah.
You have to find a family who've been in sheep farming. A lot of families have been in sheep farming for generations. We wanted to find an ordinary family for whom, financially there is jeopardy. It's not a business where you make a lot of money. And so we started casting and looking for our family. But the thing that
you would for a documentary, in fact.
Yeah, and the thing that really struck me, I think the thing you have to interrogate with live before anything else is your event. What is the event that's going to drive this show? And sheep, you may not know this, but sheep are known as short day breeders. And there are only about 4 or 5 species in Britain, 4 or 5 animals that are known as short day breeders, which means that they come into season at a particular time of year. And ewes come into season in the autumn, which means that they will all give birth around the same time. They're pregnant for 147 days. So when we were commissioned, we were in a race against time to find the sheep farm because we had to count back from our transmission dates and get those ewes in that field with those rams. It's known as tupping, and I would describe it as tupping for transmission.
You are
and actually,
Lisa.
For the first 2 days on Lambing Live, we had no live births. And the farmer,
I remember watching it actually and saying,
there were no live births. It was the third night. It was the third night before any arrived, and then they wouldn't stop coming. But that's another one of the risks, is that you are trying to, we were in a sense manipulating that part of the action.
Yeah.
Because we had to get the ewes pregnant on a particular date. Because, we had to ask the channel for our date. When are we going to be on air?
Different challenges in stargazing live, I should think. But
very different.
How on earth, tell us the story. How on earth did you manage to discover on a live programme a planet circling a distant star? That is extraordinary.
Well, this is on the second series. The astronomy community is an incredibly open place, and that really played as an advantage for us, because when I was asked to get involved with Stargazing Live, my first reaction, because I do tend to look at the negatives on these things, is it's January, it's Macclesfield, what if it's cloudy?
I so remember that.
What, was that a conversation between the two of you?
Yeah, and with the head of science as well. And actually, it could have been cloudy every night, as it happens. It wasn't, but we had to plan for it being cloudy. So we had to have all this other content ready to use in case it was cloudy. And we also had a foreign location in case it was cloudy in the UK. Weirdly enough, on the second series, it was clear in Macclesfield and cloudy with electric storms in South Africa. So, you know, you can never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So with the... we discovered a planet by doing a call out to the audience on the first night of the second series. There's an organisation called Planet Hunters who plot tiny bits of light in pursuit of new planets in the distant universe. And they need a huge amount of information to put together enough to know that there's a planet far away. And so on the first night, we did a shout out to the audience to help with this plotting of information. And by the third night, 100,000 people had gone online and plotted light, and that resulted in 1,084,000 new pieces of information. And that was enough for them to number crunch and be sure that there was a planet. It's an awful long way away, it's a bit like Neptune, but it's enough information for them to confirm that there is a new planet.
Should we see the clip? Either, you know, possibly both.
A new planet orbiting a distant star has been discovered by amateur astronomers in Britain. The planet, thought to be too hot to sustain any kind of life, was found by viewers of the BBC programme Stargazing Live, which has drawn millions of viewers to take an interest in space. Our science editor, David Chuckman, takes up the story.
Beyond Earth, beyond the solar system, new worlds are emerging deep in space, and tonight came the discovery of yet another. This artist's impression shows a planet nearly 4 times larger than Earth, found not by a space agency, but by an amateur astronomer, Chris Holmes in Peterborough, just going through computer data.
I've had a passing interest in where things are in the sky, but never had any more knowledge about it than that. Being involved in a project like this and actually being the one to find something is a very exciting position.
It was the programme Stargazing Live that got him interested. Running all week, it's attracted massive audiences, and thousands have been inspired to join the search for new planets.
I think it's the science that anybody can do. And that's what we've seen. We've seen it with this planet discovery. You know, these are just normal viewers of stargazing actually doing science. And just think about this, discovering a planet around a distant star.
Fantastic.
It was pretty good, yeah. How do you top that?
Did you ever find the other guy there were 2 of them, weren't there?
I think they did find him. He had a funny name, like Threpplewaite or something. Yeah. I guess he was the guy who plotted the final piece of information. I'm not quite sure how they came up with it.
Let's just interrogate a little bit more about presenters, because, you know, Planet Earth Live, we all know, has been... You know, I really like Planet Earth Live myself, actually, but there's been a bit of criticism of the choice of presenter, I think. I mean,
presenters.
Presenters. I mean, it's a difficult question, isn't it? It's you know, whether you go for expertise or whether you go for an existing relationship with the audience. In
it's a
essence.
really difficult call. I mean, I think a lot of the shows that we're talking about sit on BBC 2 and Channel 4, where it is, you know, the fit between the size of the audience that you're after and the ability to have expertise in your presenters, as well as, you know, content expertise, as well as live expertise, is a much easier one to get right. And doing it on BBC One, I think, definitely puts you in a space that raises much tougher questions about who you're going to put in the field of fire. And I think for both Richard and Julia, both of whom are consummate professionals, it was a really challenging experience, not helped by the fact that they were on separate continents, and not helped by the enormous logistical challenges that sat behind that. I mean, it was broadcast live or as live to 140 different countries simultaneously. It was operating in 5 time zones. 13 time zones actually, 5 different continents. I mean, it was an extraordinary logistical feat, and I think both the production team and the presenters at times probably felt as though they'd bitten off more than they could chew. So real issues there, and I think interesting questions to debate about whether all of those calls were the right calls. That said, it undoubtedly reached a different audience. I mean, this is an old skewing genre. That show skewed young. It not only averaged 4.5 million per ep, which is big and well above its slot average, and in the face of shows like the biggest shows in British television. It was up against Britain's Got Talent, it was up against Corrie, it was up against drama premieres, and it held that audience, which is astonishing for a factual piece. But more interesting than the numbers is who was watching. It was substantially younger than the BBC One factual average. Something like 15 to 20% younger, which is an incredible sort of shift in the dial. People in their 20s, 30s and 40s were watching it rather than our traditional audience for natural history on BBC One, which is 60s and 70s. Big, big shift there. Not only that, they really liked it. We measure our programmes with something called AI, which is an appreciation index. It scored 88 against the BBC One average of 82. Something like 50% of the people who watched it thought it was fresh and new, original and different, compared to 30% average for BBC One. So for all the challenges around was the live the right way to do it? Were the presenters thrown into too tough an arena? Were they the right presenters, given the sort of level of expertise that we've been talking about as central to a live conversation, something I believe in profoundly? Clearly, there was something about their presence on the show and the way the show was done that really shifted the dial for what is, as I was saying earlier, quite a stately genre in many respects, particularly on BBC One, where it's appealing to a very, very broad and largely older audience. So these are hard questions that I don't have all the answers to.
It's quite interesting because it's the same criticism, largely from the same quarters, I would say, about the coverage of the Jubilee River pageant, where there was an attempt to popularise the coverage and reach different audiences, and certain quarters didn't like it.
That's certainly true. I think complaints around about 4,000 in there. I mean, I didn't work on the Jubilee coverage, obviously. What I would say is that, first of all, more than 10 million people not only choose to sample it, they chose to stay with it. I mean, those are remarkable numbers for all the complaints that ran in the thousands, and I'm not disrespecting that, but millions and millions of people chose to sample and stay with that coverage. I think the other thing I'd say about that, and it goes back to the other 3 people who are sitting on the panel, it's largely I've got the easy job, Sanjay, Lisa and Roger at the forefront of delivering very, very difficult, live shows, is that you don't do this lightly. With the Jubilee coverage, 60 out of 90 of their remote cameras went down. I just don't think you do these kind of shows. Not so much unless you're a broadcaster, but you've got to be a sort of an indie of a certain size. You've got to have a level of experience in live. I mean, I've got huge respect for all 3 people sitting on this panel, apart from myself. And I think, that's something we have to remember. You don't tread in this territory lightly, I don't think. Sandy, would you agree with that?
Totally. I mean, by the way, I thought Planet Earth Live was a really good show, and I think it was a monumental logistical challenge. And knowing that my kids loved it and all the rest, I think it reminded me of the Lost Land of the Jaguar or whatever. That was, I remember sitting in BAFTA committees, people saying, God, how is this natural history and what have they done to it? It didn't matter to all the millions who loved it. So I think you're right. These are big, risky commissions. They're exactly the right thing to do, because I think live in these instances are helping to innovate in television, which is what we're all interested in. We all want to find new ways of doing things and try and take big risks. And I think you're absolutely right that these are big risks to the channels, and they are rightly so, and they're big risks to the production companies that make them too.
Yeah, very
Roger, what are the biggest lessons for you from the experience of Planet Earth Live? I mean, if there's another time, there may be presumably another.
We're not leaving the space.
No,
we're definitely not leaving the space.
I mean, what would you think about doing differently?
The ambition was incredibly high, wasn't it, Kim?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say we underestimated that, but there were times when you're trying to pull things together to make one show, so you have to put everything into one place to do that, pretty much, whether that's via satellite feeds or, you know, we were sending things over the internet, you know, FTP from far corners of Sri Lanka, and, you know, we had stories coming in from the Arctic, and at times it did feel like, oh, we're trying to actually do too much here. And I think we just have to be careful that then if you are trying to do too much, and then possibly process can get in the way of the delivery of what people see on screen. And you don't want that to be weakened in any way. And at times I was wary of that. So yeah, we just have to balance up our ambition with what is actually achievable. And whether that means more money to bring in more people, or whether we just, logistically, we just have to, you know, weigh all that up.
Are there any questions from among you before we move to wind-up thoughts? Yes, good.
How achievable do you think true live broadcasting is in the way that content is generated very, very soon before the actual broadcast? Or do you think these certain documentary elements, which have to be preconceived, like the planning of turning up at the location, having all the kit there and having the interviewees already there on location, is crucial to financing those live events? Is it possible to have a truly in the way that planned within a few days previous to its live stream? Will that ever be achievable, or do you think that it will need months of financial planning in order to get that live event across, which in some ways means that it won't ever truly be a live event? It will always have some kind of structure behind it.
I think something to say on how much of a programme is live and how much is recorded is quite interesting on this. I mean, Lambing Live, for example, was 50% on tape. And so that means it's 50% live, which is actually quite a lot. Stargazing Live, 60-70% on tape, which is even more. But actually a very, very short production period, about 3 months, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It is a very short turnaround. We're about to do Volcano Live from Hawaii. There are huge fixed costs with doing a live show. And Volcano Live has never been done before, partly because most volcanoes are in incredibly remote places around the world. So Hawaii, even though it seems a very, very long way to go, it's actually very accessible because it's part of the United States. You can plug everything in. You know, you don't have to go into the middle of a desert. You don't have to ship people in by helicopter. And those are all things that you have to think about when you're thinking about locations. So we've done a certain amount of filming for Volcano Live over the past few weeks. And then we go out there, and in a very short period of time, we'll make a load more films, which will go into the programme, you know, a few days later. I don't know if that quite answers your question, but I mean, there's a huge amount of logistics around live programming. And sometimes I think, I don't know if people think about live in a different way to the way that we do, but quite often, you know, you watch a live show and commissioners and controllers can take a view on it and feel that it can be changed quite substantially. And actually, it's a bit like turning a tanker. Because once you've committed to the way in which you're going to make a show, there's a massive amount of stuff in place. And if you start pulling bits out of the jigsaw, it can actually compromise it. You know, so there's a huge amount of complex logistics around getting stuff on air.
And those logistics have to be pretty rock solid, otherwise you're not going to get your show on air. And those fundamental foundations of any live series have to be in place.
But in answer to your question as well, I think one of your questions was about how quickly can you be live, and I think it's a really interesting thing because all these shows have had, you know, upwards of 3 months or more to run up to them. You could be live this weekend in a show if you needed to be. The news does it all the time. You know, current affairs do it all the time. I think it's really about what is your aspirational production value and quality of storytelling. And therefore you can be live with presenters turning around fast packages. I mean, I'm sure the people around this table could get that up and running in no time at all, but I think you'd notice a difference because you wouldn't get the quality of filmmaking and you wouldn't get the quality of script writing and storytelling that you'd expect, that you're beginning to expect to see from these shows, I'd say.
People have webcams essentially round and about the place and all that kind of thing, but how would you actually then perceive dealing with the rights and clearances and Ofcom regulations and all that kind of thing. Is that anything that anyone's ever thought about?
I mean, just
think about your cold turkey thing. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, not specifically on UGC, although I mean, superintendent, I think there might be things in terms of it's in the public domain, are you able to just fair deal them effectively and so on and so on. I think there may be ways around that. I'd say another way of looking at it would be there was a show on Channel 4 which I didn't make, Dragonfly creative director commissioned it at the time. He's at Channel 4 called 7 Days, made by Studio Lambert. A really brave and innovative attempt. Didn't quite work actually in terms of audience figures and so on, but it tried to do very fast turnaround as live documentaries. So it was filming in a location in Notting Hill, and every week you'd get the story of those characters told in documentary form on a Tuesday night. And then the viewers would then engage and say what they thought all those real people should be doing in their lives, like leave your girlfriend or get a mortgage or whatever else. And then they'd feed that back to these people, and then you'd get another documentary. I think it was really complex because when you start interfering with real people's lives in real time, it starts to become, you know, you're altering what you're observing, and that becomes difficult. So it's not an answer to your question at all. Apologies for rambling, but it's
anyway. An interesting question about whether the recent BBC Two, you know, what was it called, Life Britain in a Day? You know, whether there's a version of that done live that, you know, or with strong live elements that would work or not.
Is the answer then maybe still on a 1 minute delay so you can edit anything controversial?
Sorry.
Anyway, we have to finish. I'm just going to end with one question to Kim, which is, can we expect more?
I think what you can definitely expect more of is pieces that feel like they're focusing on a moment in time. That moment might be 8 weeks, you know, it might be a day, it might be, you know, the different sort of time frames. I'm very interested in that. Some of that will feel right to do with a big live component, definitely. Some of it won't. But I go back to what I said at the top, which is that for me, live is often and a really interesting means to an end rather than the sort of destination in itself.
Yeah. Well, let's thank our panel. I think you've all been brilliant, and I've learnt a lot. And thank you for coming.